I'm Hannah Yano. I use she, her, or they, them pronouns, and I am so excited to be presenting today at the Harry Potter Academic Conference. What a wonderful opportunity to celebrate the importance of Harry Potter and academia. Thank you so much for having me. A little bit about me. I'm originally from San Francisco, California, and I currently work at Stanford University in the Graduate School of Business with online course delivery in executive education. I previously worked at a small university in Belmont, California called Notre Dame de Nemours University, where I taught a few undergraduate psychology courses. During my time there, I had the opportunity to teach a course entitled Psychology and Harry Potter. That was in the fall of 2017. This was a course that used the Harry Potter text to explore psychological concepts. However, what came out of it was so much more than just an academic discussion. A feeling of safety and belonging emerged in that space that students shared had not been seen in other courses. They forged relationships that ended up being long-lasting beyond the bounds of the course itself. The projects they worked on were implemented and useful in their lives. I wondered, what had been so different about this course? The first thing that I noticed was that Harry Potter had brought the students to the course initially, and it bonded them in a conversation that they could fully invest in based on their mastery and understanding of the Harry Potter texts, which then allowed them to explore psychological and even personal concepts even deeper because they were viewing them through the lens of Harry Potter concepts. This was interesting because it was simultaneously a beloved text and a universal connector or language that they could all understand. So while I was getting my doctorate at University of San Francisco, I had the opportunity to do a pilot project in my statistics class, in which I did a basic Google search of all university courses in the US, which had something to do with Harry Potter. I then contacted them to see if they could engage in this pilot project. And it was through that pilot project that I met Julie Bidmead, and she ended up being my partner in the duoethnography, which was the second part of my mixed method approach for my dissertation. The first method was student survey, and the second was the duoethnography. I then defended my dissertation in December of 2019 before graduating with my doctorate. More on that later. Now that I've given an introduction to the project, let's get into it. The purpose of this study was to investigate the curriculum used in the two classrooms in this study which integrate Harry Potter, explore queer pedagogy and queer space, and discover how the curriculum, Harry Potter, pedagogy, and space influences student development. This is really best said through my dissertation, which you can find if you just search Harry Potter and Queer in the College Classroom. And my abstract reads, this dissertation reimagines the college classroom through a queer pedagogical practice that I argue results in a queer space. Through a mixed method study that I utilized duoethnography and student survey, I find that queer pedagogy, or the resistance of heteronormativity, challenging binaries, welcoming the students' lived experience as fodder for learning academic concepts, paired with a beloved fantasy text such as Harry Potter, can be a medium with which to deconstruct the traditional college classroom and reconstruct a queer space that encourages student self-authorship and questioning of the traditional hierarchy in higher education. You can read the whole abstract on your own. I won't read the whole thing. So let's get back to my main purpose. So why Harry Potter? Harry Potter, for me and my perspective, and from the experience that I had with teaching this class, is that Harry Potter spotlights marginalization, oppression, non-binary identities, non-categorical thinking, resistance, all for deeper consideration, critical thinking, and a call to action. And when I'm talking about Harry Potter, I'm talking about the text itself, the original 7-book series, not necessarily the movies. Also, me. Why did I choose Harry Potter? I love the books. I grew up with the books. I sort of grew up with Harry Potter in the 90s. And so it has a very special meaning to me personally. This is me on my 30th birthday in Florida at the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, Universal Studios, having one of the best days of my life. So the theoretical framework that I utilized for the purpose of my dissertation was rooted in critical pedagogy and queer theory, which pulls from the LGBTQIA2+ community and really looks at the concepts through a marginalized perspective. I explored queer pedagogy and queer space, which encouraged sitting in confusion and discomfort, focusing on process and not product, challenging heteronormative values, and it really deconstructs or reconstructs social norms.
I wanted to interject into my own video because this is where I typically get a lot of questions about the use of queer. The word queer and its historical usage. Some people feel uncomfortable using that word because of how it was used previously as a derogatory term. But here, in the academic context, we can use it as a construct to represent non-hierarchical spaces where faculty is a co-learner with the students, and students guide the space with their wisdom and lived experience. So it's synonymous with safety or listening to the voices who are historically marginalized, which also tend to be LGBTQIA2+ individuals. So what I'm trying to say is we're changing the meaning of queer and queerness to mean something resistant to heteronormativity and to the traditional bounds that academia has offered us. Also, queering spaces is not a new concept. I'm not the first one to talk about it. There's a lot of other research and writing about it and practice about it. And it's important to keep in mind that I'm not necessarily redefining queerness. I'm trying to bring queerness and it's in its academic context and the definition that I'm using today to reshape how college classrooms work.
As mentioned earlier, I used two different types of methodology for my dissertation. The first was duoethnography, which is a co-authorship process, a really dialogic process that embraces emergent themes and explores a shared phenomenon. And this is a working process. This is something that goes over a period of time. It's a process of writing together. And really places the researcher at the forefront of the data, which is very different than a lot of the third-party researchers, which puts others at the forefront of the data. The second part was a qualitative student survey, which I created, and the qualitative questions were really to get to the why and how these courses were important to these particular students. They were open answered questions. So it was a lot of chunking and processing of that qualitative data in order to get my final product. So with the duoethnography, I partnered with Julie Bitmead. She teaches the Deconstructing Hogwarts, a critical examination of Harry Potter in context course at Chapman University. She's been teaching it since 2013. Over the summer of 2019, Julie and I connected every 2 or 3 weeks. Julie and I connected every 2 or 3 weeks via phone, Google Docs, and everything in between. So Zoom calls. We never actually met in person, and we still haven't, but we do keep in touch. So this was a very specific place and time that we met. A lot of current events came up that related to the discussions that we were having via Google Docs in our duoethnographic process. Recollection of personal memories that emerged from our conversations, both written and spoken. We got to know each other personally. Reflection, we got to reflect on this shared phenomenon of teaching these two classes. And it was really a vulnerable process. We shared a lot of personal details and got very close very fast with Harry Potter bringing us together. And overall, we really enjoyed it. She said she would do it again, so that's a good sign. We had 24 respondents altogether for the qualitative survey. 9 were from psychology and Harry Potter, and 15 were from the Deconstructing Hogwarts course with Julie. They were equally important in data, but from a different perspective. So it was equally, if not more important than the rest of the data that we had. The coding process that I went through was really utilizing chunking, so that I was using the qualitative data to pick up on themes that were emerging as I went through the qualitative data. So initially, I collected demographic data in order to get an idea of who I was serving for the purpose of the study. But ultimately, when I was writing my dissertation, I didn't want to segregate between queer or non-binary from heterosexual or cisgender student responses. And so the purpose of the study is to see how it encourages deeper learning in all students from the queer perspective. So I'm going to go through the research questions and results, and I will organize it by do-ethnography results and then student survey results. So first question was, how are concepts of queerness, marginalization in society, non-categorical identities and deviance, and love presented in the college classroom through curriculum, including Harry Potter texts? So Julie wanted her curriculum to be real life and applicable, and I presented psychological concepts through Harry Potter themes and characters. So Julie's response was, what can students learn about real life from Harry Potter? Love as a universal language, good versus evil, and gender biases were things that came up through the teaching of her course. I focused more on relation to characters and themes. And so what I saw come up in the classroom was fluid identities, marginalized characters, and questioning authority. The emergent theme in the student survey in response to the curriculum was that it increased their critical thinking and view of the world and had helped them realize that people aren't unilateral, but instead multifaceted and a product of their upbringing. A quote from the survey that stood out to me was that it was showing me that there really are no bad guys, but people whose experiences have shaped them. Research question 2, how are faculty implementing queer pedagogy, including the Harry Potter text, to create queer spaces in the classroom? From the do-ethnographic perspective, Julie responded that the course was co-created with the students, and so therefore the content was student-led. There was a sorting ceremony. There were prefects leading the houses, and so that created community immediately. For me, we had everybody sit in a circle that first day of class, and I asked what they expected from the course, each other, and the facilitator, me, in order to establish that safe space. The main emergent themes in response to pedagogical practice and these spaces was response to the particular establishment of space. They felt a sense of comfort and belonging, and they gained an open-mindedness, this was their word, that they hadn't had previously. I didn't actually put the word open-minded in the survey at all. This was a word that came up over and over again in their responses. A quote from the responses reads, there was no right answer. And there were things I shared in the class that I would never have even shared with my closest friends. My third research question was, in what ways does Harry Potter as text influence students' identity and learning in the college classrooms included in this study? This one was huge. So not only had the topic of Harry Potter brought us together, but both of us saw that the students were the experts. This gave them a sense of ownership and confidence that they hadn't felt elsewhere. Julie responded saying students know the text as well as they know themselves, and I started calling them Harry Potter scholars. They were guiding the class. They were making the decisions of where the class was going to go. So in response to the student survey, responses were in alignment with our do-ethnography results in that because they knew the text so well, they were able to easily grasp academic concepts and feel that sense of ownership. A quote from the survey was, I identified deeply with the books that putting it in other contexts allowed me to understand further and have a greater interest. So finally, I concluded that queer pedagogy alongside a relatable and personally meaningful text, such as the Harry Potter text, in the creation of a queer space meant that the students felt heard and appreciated, were the Harry Potter experts, created long-lasting relationships in the classroom and beyond, established a sense of belonging, remembered and returned to the class as a Hogwarts of sorts, because as Rowling said, Hogwarts will always be there to welcome you home. And finally, I want to return to the students who have been and will continue to be my teachers throughout this process and close out with a few of their words. First, I could be a Harry Potter and science loving nerd, and I didn't have to be cool at all. My voice was heard. And finally, it showed me that I am not alone. Since I graduated in December of 2019 with my doctorate, I have co-authored a couple of articles on LinkedIn that were directly influenced by my dissertation research, and I've hyperlinked them here. Or you can search for Reclaiming Hogwarts, Meaning Making and Homemaking. And the second one is 4 Ways Queer Theory Shows Up in Higher Ed That You Might Not Have Known. Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to your questions.